It is hard to believe, but it has been over 40 years since Angus MacGyver first made all of America believe that brains could be more powerful than bullets. From a series that ran for 7 seasons, it became a TV icon of the late 80s in a way no other show could top. It gave us an immortal hero in Richard Dean Anderson. Teri Hatcher went straight into the ranks of major stars. Cuba Gooding Jr. made it all the way to the Oscar stage. But that is only the first half of the story, because after the lights of MacGyver, not everybody ended up with a happy ending. Some people sank into addiction. Some got hit with harassment allegations that dragged their whole name down. Some carried one of the most shocking scandals Hollywood has ever had to face. 41 years later, just how different does the MacGyver cast from 1985 look now? And who is the one that makes you say, you cannot believe life took them in that direction? Number 1. Richard Dean Anderson. Angus. MacGyver. Number 1 is someone we absolutely cannot leave out: Richard Dean Anderson. He was born in 1950. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he had just turned 35, and now he is 76 years old. MacGyver ran for 7 seasons, and the role of Angus MacGyver turned Anderson into a real TV icon of the 80s. But the price of a major role can be pretty obvious too. During all those years on MacGyver, Anderson basically lived with that character, did quite a few of the action scenes himself, and later had to deal with serious back problems, bad enough that he needed surgery. That is the side people do not really see when a star walks into the living rooms of millions of families every week. And because the shadow of MacGyver was so huge, a lot of people once thought it would be hard for him to have another big chapter in his career. Good thing that did not happen. After MacGyver, Richard Dean Anderson had another really strong turning point with Stargate SG-1, which kept him from being trapped forever in the role of a lifetime. These days he shows up less often, mostly at fan events, but his name still carries real weight. For me, just knowing he is still healthy and enjoying life day by day is enough. There is nothing better than seeing a face tied to a whole era of memories, still here, still at peace, and still loved. But if the hero is the face of the story, the one who keeps chasing him is usually the person the audience never forgets. So, let us move to number 2, the man who played the villain in this show. Number 2. Michael Desbarres. Murdoc. Do you remember Murdoc MacGyver's most unforgettable recurring enemy? The man who played that classic role was Michael Desbarres. He was born in 1948. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 37. This year, he is 78. What made Michael Desbarres stand out was not just Murdoc. After MacGyver, he kept moving down 2 roads at once, acting and living fully in music. He was part of the Power Station and even stood on the Live Aid stage in 1985, and honestly, that is not the kind of milestone just anybody gets in life. So when I look back at him now, I do not see some old TV actor. I see a man who has lived through different eras, different stages, and different versions of himself. But the most memorable part of Michael Desbarres' story comes from a much darker past. He got pulled into alcohol and drugs, then got completely sober in 1981. Some people are remembered for a role, others stay with us because they went through a terrible stretch of life, survived it, and came out the other side standing differently. Michael Desbarres is that kind of person. From an artist who once wore himself down, he slowly became the image of a man, still standing, still working, still talking to audiences, and still giving other people the feeling that your life may not be perfect, but it can still be saved. Number 3. Dana Elcar. Peter Thornton. Dana Elcar is one of those faces I end up valuing and respecting more every time I look back at MacGyver. He was born in 1927. When the series premiered in 1985, he was 58. If you count it by 2026, he would be 99, but sadly he passed away in 2005 at 77. In MacGyver, he played Peter Thornton, the boss, the ally, and one of the faces that made the world of the show feel a whole lot steadier. And what is interesting is that before becoming Pete Thornton, he actually showed up in the pilot episode in a different role, Andy Coulson. But what made people remember Dana Elcar for so long was not how many episodes he did. It was the way he faced his own hardship. In 1991, he became legally blind from glaucoma after years of battling the disease. For a lot of actors, that could have been the end. But for Dana Elcar, he kept going. MacGyver even worked that condition right into the character of Pete Thornton, starting with the episode Blind Faith. Every time I think about that detail, I feel sad and impressed at the same time. Not everybody is calm enough to stand in front of a camera while life is slowly taking away such a huge part of who they are. After MacGyver, he kept acting for a while, then retired in 2002. Looking back at Dana Elcar, now the biggest feeling I have is still regret. Regret, because actors like him never need to be loud, but once they are gone, that is when you realize how important they really were. If Peter Thornton was ever part of your memories, leave a comment to remember Dana Elcar. Number 4. Teri Hatcher, Penny Parker. Some faces only pass through MacGyver a few times, and then later, they walk straight into the top tier of Hollywood stars. Teri Hatcher is one of those cases. She was born in 1964. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, she was 21, and now she is 62. In the series, she played Penny Parker and appeared in 6 episodes. Back then, she was still just a young, bright, quick-witted face, and nobody could have known how far that name would eventually go. After MacGyver, Teri Hatcher really broke through with Lois and Clark, then hit the top for real with Desperate Housewives. She won a Golden Globe, became one of the most talked about TV stars of the 2000s, and from that point on, her private life started getting watched almost as closely as her career. In 2006, Hatcher went public about having been abused as a child and said she spoke out because she was haunted by the death of another little girl connected to the same offender. That detail alone is enough to make people see her differently. Behind a face that was so beautiful and so famous was a really painful story. But Teri Hatcher's life was never just about the spotlight. A former colleague sued her in 2010, and before that, she had forced a British tabloid to apologize for publishing false information about her private life. That is also the most familiar kind of Hollywood fate there is. The more famous you get, the harder it is to live simply. Right now, she is still working, still has new projects like Wandla and The Killer Inside the Ruth Finley Story. To me, Teri Hatcher is the kind of star who makes one thing clearer. The more you look back, some people seem that dazzling, but they had to go through a whole lot of scars to keep that light. Number 5. Traci Lords, Jenny. In the show, Traci Lords appeared as Jenny in the episode MacGyver's Women. It was not a big role, but honestly, with the name Traci Lords, hardly anybody remembers only that role. She was born in 1968. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, she was just 17. This year, she is 58. What kept people talking about her all these years was the shockwave that hit in 1986. That was when the public found out Traci Lords had used fake documents to enter the adult film industry while she was still underage. That did not just destroy her image in a split second. It shook the whole industry so badly that almost all the material featuring her was pulled from the American market. This was not just some ordinary scandal anymore. It was a case big enough to make the whole country turn and look again. But what makes this story hard for me to forget is not just the fall. It is the fact that she still made it back. After everything, Traci Lords studied at the Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute, moved into mainstream acting, and slowly rebuilt her image. In 2003, she published her memoir, Underneath It All, and that book even made the New York Times bestseller list. Even now, she has not disappeared. Traci Lords is still working with recent projects like Greedy People in 2024 and Rusty Rabbit in 2025. Hollywood once looked at her like she was a shock to the system. And yet, in a way that feels very Hollywood, she survived, she came back, and she still made people remember her name. That is honestly impressive. Number 6. Cuba Gooding Jr. Billy Colton. Cuba Gooding Jr. once held an Oscar in his hands. That one detail alone makes this story feel very different from the others. He was born in 1968. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 17. As of now, he is 58. In the MacGyver world, he was tied to the role of Billy Colton. It was not a big role, but looking back now, that name feels like an old photo of someone who later went really far and then fell really hard. Cuba Gooding Jr. broke out with Boys and the Hood, then truly reached the top when he won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Jerry Maguire at the ceremony in 1997. For a while, he was one of those faces people believed would go much farther still. But then the story turned in a completely different direction. In 2022, Reuters reported that he accepted a plea deal on a harassment charge in the Manhattan case after a string of allegations from multiple women. By 2023, he settled a civil lawsuit accusing him of rape right before jury selection, and later that same year, he faced more new lawsuits. The ironic part is that he still has not disappeared. By 2025, Cuba Gooding Jr. still had new work like Atlas King. That is what makes this story so uncomfortable. A man who once stood very high, then turned his own name into a question mark. I will leave this one with you in the comments. Do you still support Cuba Gooding Jr., or for you was all of that already more than enough to walk away? Number 7. Richard Lawson. Jesse Colton. Richard Lawson is the kind of name that feels harder to believe the more you look back. He was born in 1947. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 38. As of 2026, he is 79. In the series, he played Jesse Colton and only appeared in 3 episodes. That may not sound like much, but if you look at Richard Lawson as just a supporting face from MacGyver, I think that is way too narrow. Because behind that role is a life with so many turns that just listing them is enough to make somebody stop in their tracks. What I really cannot forget about Richard Lawson goes back to 1992. He survived the crash of US Air Flight 405 in New York, a tragedy that sounds chilling, even just hearing about it. Maybe it is because he went through something with such a thin line between life and death that looking at him afterward always feels different. Not loud, not showy, but tough. Really tough. And his life did not stop after that either. Richard Lawson kept acting, then opened Richard Lawson Studios to train actors. Like after everything he had been through, he wanted to leave something more solid behind for other people. His personal life was just as full of change. Richard Lawson and Tina Knowles had known each other for over 30 years before getting married in 2015, and then that marriage came to an end when the divorce was finalized in 2024. It does sound sad, but that is life too, especially for people who have already been through so many storms. What I respect about Richard Lawson is that after all of that, he still did not disappear. He is still working, and all the way through the 2024 to 2026 period, he was still showing up steadily in Beauty in Black. Number 8. Elyssa Davalos, Nikki Carpenter. The strangest thing about Elyssa Davalos is that the longer she stays out of sight, the more people seem to remember Nikki Carpenter. In MacGyver, she was one of those women who fit that world in a really natural way. Not loud, not flashy, but every time she was on screen, she pulled the audience's attention. Elyssa Davalos is believed to have been born in 1959. When MacGyver premiered, she was about 26, and this year she is 67. What is interesting is that before becoming Nikki Carpenter, she had already appeared on MacGyver in another role, Lisa Kohler. That detail alone is enough to make longtime viewers do a double take. What I like about Elyssa Davalos is that she was not written like a female character who was just there to look good in the frame. Nikki Carpenter had her own edge, her own toughness, and she felt strong enough to stand beside MacGyver instead of just trailing behind him. After MacGyver, Elyssa kept acting in films and series like Matlock Diagnosis Murder and Touched by an Angel, but she did not go down the path of blowing up like an A-list star. Her career was more like a softer light bright for a while, then slowly fading into quiet. Number 9. John Anderson. Harry Jackson. John Anderson was born in 1922. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 63. He passed away in 1992 at the age of 69. In the series, he played Harry Jackson MacGyver's grandfather and appeared in 5 episodes. The role was not big in terms of screen time, but it mattered a lot, because Harry Jackson was one of the rare characters who tied the show to family memory and MacGyver's own personal past. What made John Anderson so admirable is that he did not come into MacGyver as just another familiar supporting actor. He was a veteran character actor of American television with more than 500 roles in his career. That kind of experience gave him a very particular weight. Number 10. Robin Mossley, Wilt Bozer. When MacGyver first started airing in 1985, Robin Mossley was only 30 years old. He was born in 1955, and as of 2026, he is 71. In the original version of the series, he played Wilt Bozer. Back then, this was only a recurring character who popped up here and there, not a name at the center of the story. But looking back now, you realize Robin Mossley holds a pretty special place in this whole franchise, because Wilt Bozer from the original version was later brought into the 2016 reboot and turned into a full lead character. That detail alone makes his role a whole lot more interesting. Robin Mossley did not go down the path of some breakout star. He is the kind of actor who lasts, stays quiet, and feels really familiar if you have watched American television long enough. After MacGyver, he kept showing up in titles that fans of genre stuff would definitely recognize, like The X-Files, Stargate, SG-1, and even Elf. That is not the kind of career that always lives right under the lights, but it is the kind that hangs on for a long time. You think you forgot that face? Then one day you turn on an old movie, and there he is again. There is a pretty nice side story here that I think you will be glad to know, which is that Robin Mossley has been married to art director Helen Jarvis since 1995. No major scandal, no loud public crash, and no shocking comeback. Honestly, sometimes that is exactly what makes a name like Robin Mossley feel a little easier to look back on. Number 11. Della Reese, Mama Colton. Della Reese was born in 1931. When MacGyver started airing in 1985, she was 54. And sadly, she passed away in 2017 at the age of 86. In MacGyver, she played Mama Colton. The role was not very long, but the second Della Reese showed up, the whole Colton branch had a totally different kind of weight. And that makes perfect sense, because by the time she stepped into this series, she had already been a major name in American music and television for a very long time. What I like about Della Reese is that she did not need MacGyver for people to remember her. She had a song called Don't You Know that climbed to number 2 on the American charts. She had her own primetime talk show, and later she even became an ordained minister. So when you look back at Mama Colton now, the feeling is very clear this was not some supporting actress just passing through the show. This was a woman who carried a whole lifetime in the arts onto the screen with her. And sure enough, the Colton branch was even tested as its own backdoor pilot in the episode The Coltons, but that plan never went anywhere. After MacGyver, Della Reese ended up being remembered even more deeply by another whole generation through Touched by an Angel. In the last years of her life, her health declined a lot because of type 2 diabetes, multiple surgeries, and there was a period when she had to use a wheelchair. But honestly, that is not the thing that stays with me most. What stays is the image of a woman who moved through music, television, and faith, and still kept that deep sense of grace right to the very end. Not everybody gets a life that full and that beautiful. Number 12. Jason Priestley, Danny. Before a whole generation came to know Jason Priestley as Brandon Walsh, he had already drifted through MacGyver in a role that would be really easy to miss. Jason Priestley was born in 1969. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 16. As of 2026, he is 57. In the series, he played Danny in the episode Blood Brothers in 1988. Looking back now, it is actually pretty interesting. From one short appearance like that, he went straight to becoming one of the biggest teen idols on American television in the 90s. After MacGyver, Jason Priestley took off very fast with Beverly Hills 90210. The role of Brandon Walsh turned him into a teenage face that was everywhere, and it also brought him 2 Golden Globe nominations. But Jason Priestley's real life did not follow the same smooth line as that image. In 1999, he was arrested for driving drunk after crashing into a utility pole in the Hollywood Hills. Then, in 2002, he got into a very serious racing accident at Kentucky Speedway, slammed into a wall at nearly 180 miles an hour, and was badly injured. What matters is that Jason Priestley did not disappear after those crashes. He kept acting, directing, doing television, and in recent years, he has also shown up in Wild Cards as George. That series is still going all the way into 2026. Jason Priestley is one of those faces that really brings back the feeling of Hollywood from that era, when you look back bright, glamorous, and then suddenly slammed by life with no warning. Number 13. Mayim Bialik, Lisa Woodman. Mayim Bialik is a really unusual case on this list. She was born in 1975. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, she was only 10. As of 2026, she is 51. In the series, Mayim played Lisa Woodman and appeared in 3 episodes. Back then, it was just a pretty small child role. But looking back now, you realize that from being a little girl who passed through MacGyver, Mayim Bialik ended up living through so many different versions of herself that it is hard to fit her into any one box. The first version was child star. After MacGyver, Mayim took off very fast with Blossom and became a familiar face on American television in the early 90s. Then, instead of staying on that same track, like a lot of other child actors, she turned onto a road that hardly anybody in Hollywood ever picks. Mayim studied at UCLA, earned a bachelor's degree, and then a doctorate in neuroscience, and defended her dissertation in 2007. That alone is already enough to make her story feel completely different from the rest. But Mayim Bialik still did not stop there. She came back to the screen with The Big Bang. Teri played Amy Farrah Fowler, got 4 Emmy nominations, then stepped into pop culture all over again with Jeopardy! Of course, a big name also comes with controversy. What she wrote about Harvey Weinstein in 2017 got heavily criticized, and her stretch with Jeopardy! Did not exactly end smoothly either. Even so, right now, Mayim is still very active with Mayim Bialik's Breakdown, where she talks about psychology, mental health, and science in a way that feels very much like her own. Number 14. Bruce Harwood. Willis. Bruce Harwood is the kind of face a lot of people may not remember by name right away, but if you look closely, you realize you have seen him somewhere a whole lot of times already. He was born in 1963. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 22. As of 2026, he is 63. In the series, Bruce Harwood played Willis, a technician at the Phoenix Foundation, and appeared in 4 episodes from 1990 to 1991. Actually, even before Willis, he had already passed through MacGyver one more time as Juice in the episode Blowout in 1987. What is so good about Bruce Harwood is that he did not go down the path of some loud, flashy star. He fits the kind of role that feels intellectual, a little nerdy smart, and trustworthy. Willis in MacGyver already had exactly that quality, and later that same kind of role led him to the most famous character of his career, John Fitzgerald Byers in The X-Files. Bruce Harwood played Byers for 36 episodes, then kept going with that role in The Lone Gunman for another 13 episodes. Seen that way, MacGyver feels like the place that very early on already hinted at exactly the kind of character that suited him best. Outside television, Bruce Harwood was also a founding member of Bard on the Beach, that very well-known summer Shakespeare festival in Vancouver. That detail makes me like him even more, because it shows that behind all those familiar supporting roles was a man with a real stage background. But the final name on this list is completely different. Just saying it out loud makes you feel a whole other level of screen presence show up right away. Number 15. Cleavon Little Frank Colton. Cleavon Little is the last name on this list, and honestly, it is also the name with the greatest weight. He was born in 1939. When MacGyver premiered in 1985, he was 46. The saddest part is that he passed away in 1992 at the age of 53 from colon cancer. In MacGyver, he played Frank Colton appeared in The Black Corsage, then came back in The Coltons, the episode that was used as a backdoor pilot for the Colton branch but never went any farther. What made Cleavon Little special is that MacGyver was not the place that made his name. Quite the opposite, really. He came into this series already carrying a whole separate level of stage and screen class with him. He had already won a Tony and a Drama Desk for Pearly, then became nearly unforgettable as Sheriff Bart in Blazing Saddles. By 1989, he had also picked up an Emmy for Dear John. The most memorable thing about lists like this was never just who got older and how. What stays with you longer is always the stretch of life between those two pictures. Some people went through glory. Some went through illness. Some stumbled right there under the lights, and some left too early before getting all the extra time they deserved to have. That is also why I always love making videos like this. Not just to compare old pictures to now, but to hold on to the stories of people who once lit up the screen in very different ways. And if this show was ever part of your younger years, share with me in the comments what memory you have of MacGyver Richard Dean Anderson or any face on today's list. I would also really love to know what topic you want to see next, because this channel truly is something we are building together to keep looking back on a glorious Hollywood era that so many of us still have never forgotten.